Trevor?
I'd never heard that before about counterphobic presentation in different types. Could you say more about that?
Yeah, it happens with the head types because we're talking about phobia.
Got it.
So, for example, when Morano asked me to show him my research, I just gave him my book and my research paper, and he had not considered countertypes for all the types. And he asked if I'd co-teach with him and add my research findings. I was more than willing to do that. In fact, I love sharing what I learned. And he said, well, Catherine, everybody asks me if there's a counterphobic 3, a counterphobic 9, or whatever. And I go, no, 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 not counterphobic, just countertype. They appear based on the merge between the instinct and the type. Those two fears make it not appear like they could be that type. So, for example, even doing this in the gut center, the sexual wants union fusion, and the 8 wants the autonomy. Well, how do you have union fusion and autonomy? Well, the primary, more primitive drive is the instinct. So I would be in search of twinship, that kind of affinity that transcends practicality, in favor of anything else. But because I'm still an 8, I will surrender. That's why it's called possession surrender. I must have the total devotion of the person that I surrender to. But then, because I'm a gut type, I snatch it back. And then I'm autonomous again. And then I surrender. And then I'm autonomous. So I surrender to loved ones. But I can't live like that every day, all day, because the 8 is saying autonomy, autonomy, autonomy. You have to do it your own way and go your own way. Does that make sense? So with the head types, because fear and paranoia are part of the head center, and the primitive version, the social type. So if someone's a social, they might also get 6 cards, because if you remember the pictures of the social cards, in one, they're people, doing teamwork or pulling against each other. And then I use words that could indicate being separate from. And so if they chose self-pres and social in that order, and they had 6 cards, even if they're a 7 or a 5, they're going to get the messages, because the intention of the notices was to just have people go deeper, that their combination is very specific for people who mistype, and most commonly the 6 and 9. Why? Because they're hardwired to track behaviors. They are meant to do that. So you track behaviors and then you adjust to the situation at hand. But the head types adjust by assessment. And if there's negative possibilities, even the 7 will get paranoid and then just go to greener pastures, or they might become very rebellious and challenge. Does that give some insight, Trevor?
Yeah, I think it does actually. I had a phase in my life where, as in my late teens, and I concluded that staying in my comfort zone, I wasn't going to get anything I wanted at all. And although I didn't look forward to it, I had a strategy of kind of forcing myself to do a lot of things that I disliked, to be fitter, to be more social, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I wonder if that's part of it.
Could be. And the other thing, you have sexual second, which brings up competition, because we compete for our mate.
Mm.
And I don't know, you're stacking how close they are, but when they're close, they almost work in tandem with each other. And so it makes a 5 more interested in attracting and in having a closer relationship. Now, if the 5 has 4, there's more arrogance, more confidence in what you know, in the intellect. And if it's 1, then there's more certainty about truth. If it happens to be 5, 4, 8, then there's more proclamations or declarations of their sense of truth. But the interesting thing to note is they don't just make it up. Fives have already researched it before they proclaim something. Do you relate to that?
Very much. That's why I get upset when people don't call me open-minded.
Yeah, because you,
I've worked through the questions.
yeah, yeah. Eights feel that way too, but 5 and 8 have a shared line, and it's the eight's already gone through all the variables ourselves, and we think of things throughout our life. And maybe we haven't looked at the most recent research, although the intellectual 8 does. Now, who's the intellectual 8? The 8 with 4 and 7. Because the 4 identifies with being intellectual, trying to make sense of their suffering and what it means. And if the 8 has 5, they're intellectual as well, but they might be a little quieter about it. But the 7's very intellectual. So any of those combinations makes an intellectual 8. The other 8s are not intellectual, and they're more the original archetype that Naranjo saw. And then I found out that I said, well, Claudia, how many 8s have you worked with that actually have done the work? And I go, like, how many people in Eureka were 8s? And he goes, 1. And I figured out there was a strong possibility that person was an 863, which makes the 6 automatically counterphobic. Whenever 6 is in a tritype, if there's an 8, it's always counterphobic. If there's a 1, it's usually counterphobic. It just depends on the third type. But then I talked to the person who dated that 8. I described the 863, and she goes, yeah, in fact, that's how we came up with the definition of an 8. And I go, aha, because anytime a 638, a 368, or an 836 reads the description of that tritype, they think they're an 8. And you can't talk them out of it. It isn't until they see the way they react to fear that they understand 6 is, because it's the fiercest type, more than 3, 7, 8.